Hari Om. Geeta Vinod, you can start. You're muted. Yeah.
Hari Om, ma'am.
Please.
Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Grathitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitaamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashaadhyayinim अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणी नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे फुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयः प्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्स सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम् भीष्मद्रोणतटा जयद्रथजला गान्धारनीलोत्पला शल्यग्राहवती कृपेण वहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थामविकर्णघोरमकरा दुर्योधनावर्तिनी सोत्तीर्णा खलु पाण्डवैरणनदी कैवर्तकः केशवः पाराशर्यवचः सरोजममलं गीतार्थगन्तोत्कटम् नानाख्यानककेसरं हरिकथा सम्बोधनाबोधितम् लोके सज्जन षट्पदैरहरहः पेपीयमानं मुदा भूयाद् भारत पंकजं कलिमल प्रध्वंसि न श्रेयसे मूकं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम् यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्र रुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः। हरि ओम।
Hari Om. सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्य पर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरु परम्पराम् ॐ परं वरिष्ठं ब्रह्मिष्ठं परमानन्दरूपिणं परमार्थानन्दयतिं सद्गुरुं प्रणतोऽस्म्यहम् So today we continue with the verses we were doing from 13th to 18th verse, right? So we are now in the middle, and in these verses beginning from the 13th verse up to the 18th verse, Lord Krishna is talking about Nyayam, which is another name for Brahman. And in all these verses, Lord Krishna is revealing the different features of Brahman. And therefore this particular portion is a very subtle part of the teaching itself, right? Because it is revealing the different features of Brahman, and it is one of the most abstract portions of the Gita, because several abstract ideas are packed into one area. Those of you who are attending this class after attending my introduction to Vedanta would definitely find it easier and better to relate. For the others, repeated hearing, you will get used to this. Otherwise, I would recommend that you spend that little extra time and catch up with the introduction to Vedanta lessons, which are available as a separate course on the same website. Okay, because otherwise the ideas will seem abstract. It is the most abstract part of the Gita, actually, what we are going through now. Okay, so it is a very gradual process, and that is why in the scriptural texts, right, especially Vedantic texts, they say must be studied repeatedly, and they say Pauna Punyena Shravanam Kuryat is one of the dictums, right, of Vedanta. In Brahma Sutra, an exclusive sutra is actually dedicated for this purpose, right? Avrittihi asavrit upadeshat. Asavrit avrittihi means repeatedly you should study. The first time you hear or read, you may understand 10%, 15%, 20% or so. Again, second time you hear, the percentage increases, and gradually it can be understood. Therefore, if there are especially new students who are hearing these portions for the first time, it's just that they should not become disheartened, right? It will become clearer. And Brahman in this area is actually here as Nyayam is defined as consciousness principle, which is a very, very abstract principle to understand. And that is why Lord Krishna himself uses the word sukshmatvat tad avigneyam. The very word sukshma means abstract, and to understand these abstract principles of consciousness, Lord Krishna himself gives two examples later on. They are very well-known examples of Vedanta, and the more we dwell upon these two examples, gradually we can grasp the consciousness also. One example given is Akasha or space. In fact, in verse 33, we are going to see, right? Yata sarvagatam saukshmyad akasham nopalipyate sarvatra vastito dehe tadatma nopalipyate. So the shloka comes in the same 13th chapter, right, in the 33rd verse. And the more you meditate upon a principle called space, right? Space is not emptiness, right? The modern scientist also now feels that space is not emptiness. Of course, once upon a time they thought differently. So Akasha is the subtlest form of matter that we are aware of or we can discern. Therefore, Akasha Dhyanam, dwelling on space, will be useful, right? And the second example Lord Krishna gives in the 13th chapter itself, in verse 34, is Yata prakashayatyekaha kritsnam lokamimam ravihi kshetram kshetri tata kritsnam prakashayati bharata. The second example is Surya Prakashaha, which pervades all over during the daytime. So we are not talking about Surya, the sun. We are not talking about the solar disk, which is several miles far away. We are talking about Surya Prakashaha, which spreads all over. So the more you meditate upon Akasha and Prakasha, gradually consciousness also can be grasped. While talking about consciousness in some of the previous chapters, we have seen this example of Surya Prakasha, the sunlight falling on the moon on a Paurnami night. So what falls on the moon is actually not the moonlight, because moon does not have light of its own. It is basically the sunlight which spreads on the entire sky, and that is spread over the moon also. I see the light on the moon, but on inquiry, I understand it is on the moon, but it does not belong to the moon. The second message that we have to draw from the moonlight example is that even though the light is on the moon, light is visible on the moon, light is not confined to the boundaries of the moon. Light is on the moon also. So the Surya Prakasha is beyond the boundaries of the moon also, even though I recognize the light on the moon, right? It is pervading. We see that, right? So it's exactly like the body, right? And consciousness. Basically, the body is like the moon and the light is like the consciousness. So the moonlight is on the moon but does not belong to the moon. Similarly, consciousness is in the body, but it does not, we have studied the features, as not a part, product or property of the body. It is a distinct entity, and therefore the more I experience the consciousness in the body now and then, right, we can feel it when we pinch ourselves, or we think about it, right? Then we have to dwell upon it as consciousness is present, right, in the body, but it is not a part or product of the body. It is a distinct entity. Having understood that it is a distinct entity, I should also note that just as Surya Prakasha falls on the moon, the consciousness is also falling on the body and enlivens it, right? How far does consciousness extend? It is all pervading. That's like Akasha and Prakasha. There is a Chaitanya Tattvam. I experience in the body that Chaitanya Tattvam as Nyayam Brahman, the ultimate truth. Having grasped the all-pervading consciousness, which resembles Akasha and Prakasha, right? It resembles, but it is not Akasha, right? Because Akasha also comes under matter. Prakasha also comes under matter. Consciousness is neither matter nor energy. So we are comparing to Akasha and Prakasha, but we should remember consciousness is neither of them, right? It is neither matter nor energy, right? So the example should not mislead us, right? Why do we say consciousness is different from both matter and energy? Because both matter and energy are subject to change or transformation. They will manifest when the creation comes, and when the creation resolves, they will also resolve. So they are subject to modification from the unmanifest to the manifest, manifest to the unmanifest. Whereas consciousness is not subject to any type of transformation. If you look at Einstein's theory, E is equal to mc squared, there is convertibility of matter and energy, right? Whereas consciousness is nirvikara tattvam, not subject to any transformation or change. So it is this Chaitanya Lord Krishna is talking about more and more. So first we have to grasp, and then holding the Chaitanya in our mind, in our understanding, we have to note more and more features of that consciousness. He's going to talk about it, right? So in the 16th verse that we completed, right, Lord Krishna said consciousness is inside the body as well as outside the body, just as the space is in and out, right? And some more features he's going to speak about, and the following shlokas and some more profound messages are given. Okay. Continuing. Avibhaktam cha bhuteshu, avibhaktam cha bhuteshu, vibhaktamiva cha sthitam, vibhaktamiva cha sthitam, bhutabhartru cha tagnyeyam, भूतभर्तृ च तज्ञेयम् ग्रसिष्णु प्रभविष्णु च ग्रसिष्णु प्रभविष्णु च. So another important feature of Brahman or consciousness, which we can again understand with these two examples of Akasha and Prakasha, right? Both space and light are not subject to division. So you cannot cut a portion of space from one place and take it to another place. In fact, if that is possible, right, then from the crowded urban area, we have a problem, right? In the crowded urban area, we can always cut space from somewhere else and bring it here, right? So it is akhandam or avibhaktam, right? The same you can extend to the light also, right? So you cannot cut the light which pervades the hall and which spreads all over the body. In this room, right, there is light and that pervades, right? You cannot cut the light also, right? Like you use a scissors to cut some cloth, you cannot cut, right? So Chaitanya is also exactly only one, like Akasha, and light which is spread all over the body. Body can be divided, right? But consciousness is in the body, right? That's the number one thing, and it cannot be divided. And it is also there in between bodies. Like just as light is over one body and the other body, it is there in between also, right? Everywhere. So it is indivisible. Therefore, avibhaktam cha bhuteshu. In the being, it is not divided, even though it is looking, appearing as, right, divided elsewhere, right? So it appears to be seemingly divided, right? Because the consciousness which is experienced in one body and the consciousness that is experienced in another body, we think it is divided, seemingly divided. So it's exactly like pot space, right? And say room space, right? So it appears as it is, as if it is divided, right? So therefore, avibhaktam cha bhuteshu, it is not divided, right? And there is only one consciousness, right? So now modern science talks about consciousness, but it talks about consciousness raising in the brain and resolving in the brain. So science does not accept consciousness as outside the brain. Why? Because they are not able to detect the consciousness outside. Therefore, they think that something is happening in the brain which is born and which is gone. So Lord Krishna says it is neither born nor gone, nor is it divided, but vibhaktam eva sthitam. It appears to be divided. For the seeming division, the example that is given is like space obtaining in several different containers, right? So there is a smaller room, there is a bigger room, there is a large hall, there's a still larger wedding hall, right? So the enclosed space seems to be different, smaller space, larger space, etc., right? So thus we divide the space and we give an adjective also, small space, big space, etc. In reality, there is no small space, bigger space, etc. There's only one all pervading space, right? And instead of saying, we just say hall space, room space, etc. Instead of saying that the space is all pervading. It is basically a transferred evidence. You transfer the adjective from one noun to another. Exactly like we say today was a gloomy day, right? And the day is not gloomy. My mind is gloomy and I transfer my mental gloom to the day and say this is a gloomy day. This is called a transferred epithet, or you're transferring the adjective, right? So similarly in space you cannot have adjective small, big, etc. It is just taking the adjective of the object which is enclosing, right? So therefore vibhaktam eva sthitam is seemingly divided is the consciousness, and the seemingly divided consciousness is called jivatma, and the original undivided consciousness is called Paramatma. So Jivatma is not divided consciousness, right? We should add the adverb seemingly divided consciousness is Jivatma. So now Lord Krishna jumps into the next feature, which is a very big feature, still more abstract and difficult to grasp. He says the entire universe is matter consisting of the world, body, mind, etc. The entire creation is born out of Brahma Chaitanyam only. This consciousness is the Karanam, Brahman is the Karanam, and the entire universe is a Karyam or product. So through this, Lord Krishna is conveying another very, very important concept, which we saw in the 7th chapter. Okay. So Vedanta says there is a Karanam and there is a Karyam. So gold is the Karanam and ornament are Karyams. Wood is the Karanam, furniture is Karyam, right? And world is the Karyam and Brahman is the Karanam, right? And products don't exist as a substance, we saw, right? They don't exist separate from the substance, right? For instance, you cannot have gold ornaments without the gold, right? So the weight of the gold ornaments belongs only to the gold in it. The ornament is just a nama rupa, right? When you say the ornament weighs 10 grams, it is the gold weight that we are talking about, right? So the cost, the gold alone is the substance, right? So therefore, whenever you use the word product, we should know that it is nothing but non-substantial name and form referred as Nama Rupa in Upanishads, right? So not only we should understand it is not substantial name and form, it does not have an independent existence of its own. Ornament cannot exist separate from gold, right? So that is very important to understand, right? So therefore, what is the corollary? Every product is a name and form having no existence of its own. So Lord Krishna is now dropping this big bombshell in this shloka. He says, consciousness is Karanam, the entire material universe is Karyam or product. By saying the entire universe, he's saying Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Jalam, Prithvi, Bhuloka, Bhuvarloka, Suvarloka, Chennai, India, everything, right? Whatever we want. My possession, my clothes, my jewelry, everything. The entire universe is a product, right? And through this, Lord Krishna wants us to note a very, very difficult, unswallowable thing. Since the entire world is a product and world is nothing but Nama and Rupa, it is non-substantial, hollow by itself, name and form only. So in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it is openly said, right? In 161, first chapter, 6th Brahmana, the first verse, Trayam va idam nama rupam karma tesham namnam vagityetat. It goes on like that, right? The world which you value so much is nothing but name and form. So matter is name and form. Not only that, right? What is the third message we saw? The ornaments don't have an existence of its own. It has got borrowed existence only. Similarly, world does not have existence of its own. Matter does not have its own existence, right? And that is why when the scientists probe into matter, what is happening? Over the last several decades, they keep on and on and on. Molecule, atom, nucleus, all kinds. Now it is God particle. Then they use some huge accelerator, all of that, right? Some LAD or something it's called. Right? In Europe, they keep analyzing the God particle, right? They want to find out what exactly it is, right? It is keeping on changing over the last few decades from the time we went to school to now, right? But the Vedantin has a smile, right? It does not exist, right? But there's no point in the Vedantin telling the scientists it's a secret to be kept within the Vedantic group. So the world does not have any existence of its own, right? So it does not have an existence of its own. So naturally the question is, it must be borrowing existence from somewhere, right? From the cause. So Lord Krishna says the entire matter is product. And what is the cause? He says Brahman is the cause, and he has defined Brahman as consciousness principle. So therefore, the message given here is consciousness being the cause, consciousness alone lends existence to the world. And consciousness borrows existence from where? No, it's an independent principle which is anadi and is of the nature of existence and consciousness, and of the nature of happiness also we saw, right? So consciousness borrows existence from where? We must remember very carefully, consciousness does not borrow existence from anywhere. Only the karyam borrows. Karanam does not borrow, it has existence of its own. And this is the famous statement given in Chandogya Upanishad, Vacharambanam vikaro namadheyam mrittika ityeva satyam, right? Which means what? Mrittika means clay is the only satyam. Everything else is nama and rupa in terms of pot or in terms of a small tumbler or whatever, mug, whatever it is, right? So other than Brahman, nothing else existed, right? And other than that, whatever you see as the tangible universe, right, it is name and form only, seemingly existent, borrowing existence from Brahman. And whatever borrows existence from Brahman, we use the term mithya, M-I-T-H, okay, mithya, okay, Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya, Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha, right? Very famous Upanishadic statement, right? So we have to understand that Brahman is the Karanam and the rest of the world is Karyam, seemingly existent, right? So then the final leap comes. The final leap is Brahman, the consciousness, is not an object of experience, because any object you experience is made up of matter, right? So you touch everything and see. Any object of experience is matter, right? Therefore, Brahman, the Chaitanyam, is not an object of experience. Then if it is not an object, then what is it? It is the very subject, I, the experiencer of the world, experiencer of the body, experiencer of the mind, experiencer of the thought. And when there is total silence, when no thoughts are there, no world is experienced, that silence is also experienced by what, right? That is the Chaitanya Tattvam, I the experiencer, Aham Brahmasmi. That is the final teaching, right? There is a sutram called Aghamarshana Suktam. Okay, it is a Suktam, Aghamarshana Suktam, which we are supposed to chant during Snanam, right? Regularly we are supposed to chant even the mantra itself, and but that mantra has an ultimate teaching. Okay, the sutra is called Aghamarshana Suktam, and we are supposed to chant it during a bathing, right? We talk about, Varuna, Indra, all of them, all of you come and bless me, and all of that, right? And we say that it will please come and purify, and if I've eaten unclean food, take care of it. During the bath we chant this, and in that, the very last, the last but one or something, I'm sure the minute I chant this, you would have heard this. The last sentence goes like this: Yohamasmi Brahma Ahamasmi, Ahamasmi Brahma Ahamasmi, Ahameva Juhomi Swaha. What this says is, after saying that, oh Varuna, Indra, come and purify me, I'm polluted, etc., it says whatever all of this is, I am that Brahman, right? And what the message that is going from here is, I am the Brahman, and all these other devatas that I'm praying, right, is all a form of expression of that Brahman only, right? So it is a purification of the mind and intellect also, finally. So you start with the gross body, pray all of that, and then finally this particular mantra talks about discerning and actually claiming that Brahman as Ahamasmi, right? And also indicating that all the other devatas are also a manifestation of that very same Brahman, the Sakshi Chaitanyam, right? So very, very profound message in that Aghamarshana Sutram, right? So look at the Aghamarshana Suktam. A Sutram is a mnemonic. So here it is basically Suktam. Okay. So the second line here, if you see, Tadnyayam, this Brahma Chaitanyam, the all-pervading consciousness, is Srishti Sthiti Laya Karanam. Just as ornaments are born out of gold, from this Chaitanyam alone the world appears and it goes back into Chaitanyam. Therefore, it is Srishti Sthiti Laya Karanam. Prabha Vishnu means Srishti Karanam, the cause of the appearance of this material universe. Bhuta Bhartru. Bhartru means Sthiti Karanam. It's a sustainer of the entire material universe, which I often quote, Mayeva Sakalam Jatam, Mai Sarvam Pratishtitam. Right? All the Upanishads talk about this Brahman alone more and more, right? So from that only the shloka has been borrowed. So Lord Krishna has extracted from these Upanishadic teachings. Prabha Vishnu means Srishti Karanam, Bhuta Bhartru is Sthiti Karanam, and finally Grasishnu. That Brahman alone is the swallower of the entire universe also. Swallowing means the resolver, right? So the full-fledged world with all the names and forms, right? Panchabhutani, Desha, Kala, everything is resolved into me, Brahman, right? So that Chaitanyam, Tad Jneyam, Brahman is talked about here. Okay. Audio is not clear, breaking. Are all of you having this problem? So, okay, you're all okay, fine. So, people who are having a problem, please log out and log in. You should be okay then. Okay. Yeah, very important verse coming up here. Jyotishamapi tajyotihi, Jyotishamapi tajyotihi, Tamasah paramuchyate, Tamasah paramuchyate, Jnanam Jneyam Jnanagamyam, Jnanam Jneyam Jnanagamyam, Hridi sarvasya vishtitam, Hridi sarvasya vishtitam. So here alone Lord Krishna clearly defines Brahman as the light of consciousness principle. Jyotisham api tajyotihi. Jyotihi means light, and light can be defined as that which reveals objects, right? These are all called, like, there is light here because they reveal the object, the computer, the mobile, your book, the word, etc. Everything is revealed. So whatever reveals something, the existence of something, can be called light. So figuratively, from that, Vedanta extends further. Anything that reveals can be called light, right? So based on that, Vedanta says that our 5 sense organs are also like light only. Because even though the light reveals the people, the light itself is revealed by what? Only by the eyes. In the presence of the eyes alone, light is revealed. In the absence of the eyes, right? Even though the light may be bright, light is not revealed. And light cannot reveal other things also if I cannot see with my eyes, right? So the eyes themselves can reveal the object only when the mind is behind it. If the mind is not behind the eyes, they cannot function as the revealer of things. That's why you would have noticed this. When our mind is elsewhere, the eyes are open and our dearest friend may be crossing in front of us. But because the mind is not behind the eyes, it doesn't register in our mind and we have a blank look, right? We term it blank look, right? So we don't register, right? Because the mind is not behind the eyes. Thus, every sense organ is revealing light only when the mind is behind it, right? So, and the the eye is what? The mind, right? So the light behind the mind, the light behind the eye is the mind. So Vedanta goes to the final step. Mind itself can become a light only when it is pervaded by the consciousness principle, because mind or brain by itself does not have sentiency because it is made up of matter. Where did we see this? We've seen it in Introduction to Vedanta, that everything is only subtle matter maximum, but it is matter only. So therefore the matter is the brainy matter. It does not have light of its own. Only when Chaitanyam pervades the mind, then it becomes sentient. So Chaitanyam lends light to the mind lends light to the sense organs, and the sense organs lend light to the world. So in Drishdya Viveka, Vidyaranya Swami opens, right, with this verse. Rupam Drishyam Lochanam Drik Tad Drishyam Driktu Manasam Drishyadhi Vrittayah Sakshi Drigeva Natu Drishyate. So ultimate light is only consciousness. Without the light of consciousness, everything else is useless. Whether it is sun, moon, tube light, sense organs, or brain, all of them are utterly useless if this ultimate light of consciousness is not there. Therefore, Jyotisham api tad jyotihi. Consciousness is the ultimate light of all the lights. So, in Mundaka Upanishad, a very, very important verse which I've chanted before also, I just thought I should actually bring it up here. This alone we chant during puja, right? There is a mantra, Natatra Suryo Bhati. How it goes like this: Natatra Suryo Bhati na Chandra Tarakam Nema Vidyutho Bhanti Kutoyam Agnihi Tameva Bhantam Anubhati Sarvam Tasya Bhasa Sarvamidam Vibhati. Right? That alone they chant, right? During the Aarti, when the Karpura Deeparadhana goes, in the Nitya Puja also, people chant this, right? And I actually remember in childhood, I never understood the meaning of this, but this was a practiced at home during every puja, right? And my father would get moved when he chanted this. I never understood why he got moved, right? And then when I became a little older, maybe it's important for me to share this with you because you can share this with the children. My father just replaced the consciousness with God or Bhagavan and just explained that to me, because I'm sure he thought that at that stage I wouldn't understand the real Tatparyam, right? But this became such a ritual that we all got this by heart. And much later, when I got exposed to Mundaka Upanishad, I actually understood the true meaning of this particular verse, right? The sun does not illumine that Atma. The moon and the stars do not illumine. These flashes of lightning do not illumine. How can this fire, the Karpura Aarti that I have in this hand, right, ever illumine anything, right? Everything shines after that Atma alone, which is self-effulgent, and by its light, all of this, the entire Anatma world shines, right? Very beautiful shloka, worth getting by heart and chanting every day. So, Tajyotihi tamasaha param uchyate. And being the ultimate light, it is beyond the darkness and untouched by darkness or ignorance. Tamaha has two meanings. One is darkness and the other is ignorance. So, consciousness is never touched by ignorance. Mind is affected by ignorance, but not the Atma itself. Therefore, it transcends darkness. And then in the second line, Jnanam, Nyayam, Jnanagamyam. That Brahman alone is in the form of knowledge also. So when different thoughts arise in the mind, every thought in the mind associated with consciousness becomes a knowledge. When I look at the wall thought arises in the mind, and the wall thought associated with consciousness becomes wall knowledge. The tree thought associated with consciousness becomes tree knowledge. One consciousness alone associates with different thoughts appearing as different forms of knowledge. I just thought I will spend a minute explaining this. Those of you who are not able to relate to this, it's not a problem. This process of knowledge, right, called epistemology, is discussed so much in advanced Vedantic texts. Very beautifully explained, and those of you who are interested can proceed beyond Gita to Upanishads and these later on to the Advaitic texts. In Panchadashi by Vidyaranya, as well as Vichara Sagaram, by Vasudeva Brahmendra Saraswati. It's a Sanskrit translation of a Hindi Advaitic text by Nischala Dasa, Sadhu Nischala Dasa, which is, you know, a more recent text, 18th century or 19th century. And there, this epistemology, methods of cognition, they are discussed at length. And it's mind-boggling that when they reveal that thought is also, right, only anatma. So vritti vyapti and phala vyapti are discussed at length. Basically, the thought, right, which is the object thought, is first, you know, present, and then the consciousness falls on that thought and makes it, you know, into knowledge. That conversion is by what we refer to as phala vyapti, right? And these are articulated so well, and extensive analysis has been done in some of these texts. Very interesting if you have that mind and to actually study that extremely subtle concepts there, right? So therefore, jnanam, consciousness alone is jnanam or knowledge in association with thought. Jnayam, that consciousness alone is Jnayam Brahma, that which Arjuna wanted to know. So the word Jnayam is Arjuna's original question. What is that thing to be known? Is Jnayam, and that is nothing but Brahman and Jnana Gamyam. Jnana Gamyam, the goal reached by this knowledge. Gamyam means destination. So the goal to be reached by knowledge is also the same Brahman only, because when a spiritual seeker ultimately knows Brahman, how does he know Brahman? Only in one way. Tat Tvamasi, which is that Brahma Aham Asmi. Therefore, knowing Brahman is discovering Brahman as myself. Therefore, Shastra says, knowing Brahman is as good as reaching Brahman, right? So, knowing Brahman is as good as reaching Brahman, right? Therefore, Jnana Gamyam, the knowledge is Brahman. It is a thing to be known. It is a destination to be reached. Everything is Brahman. And where can we discover that Brahman? Very nice. You need not travel anywhere. Sarvasya hridi vishishtitam. In the heart, and heart here means mind. In the mind itself, it's available as the very witness, Sakshi Chaitanyam. So that experience, right? Many experiences come and go continuously. They are all arriving and departing experiences. Among the arriving, departing experiences, there is a constant witness consciousness which is there, which doesn't arrive and depart. That Sakshi Chaitanyam in the heart is Brahman. So with this, Lord Krishna concludes the description of Brahman, and hereafter he is going to actually go to the next topic, right? And which we have to now commence in the 19th shloka, which is actually a consolidating shloka. So just a very brief summary in 2-3 lines is, Brahman is of the nature of Chaitanya, which is the light of all the lights. Because all lights can be useful to us only if we are conscious beings, we must remember that it is the light of all the lights. And if there is an inert object, a chair, right? And if you light up the place, then the chair is, you know, there is light on the chair and the chair is visible, and only then we have a benefit or use. So a light becomes a light only when there is a conscious being aware of the light. Therefore, all external lights are meaningful only when our sense organs get to use them. And sense organs are meaningful only when the mind is behind the sense organs, and the mind itself is meaningful only when there is consciousness principle making that mind sentient. And therefore, in the scriptures, consciousness is defined as the ultimate light of all lights, and this jnanam alone is named Jnayam by Arjuna, right? So we must remember that through this knowledge, all spiritual seekers have got a destination, and that destination is also termed as moksha, another name for Brahman only. Continuing, iti kshetram tata jnanam, iti kshetram tata jnanam, jneyam choktam samasatah, Nyeyam choktam samasatah madbhakta etad vijnaya madbhakta etad vijnaya madbhavayopapadyate madbhavayopapadyate iti. In this manner, in the last 18, right, or 17 verses, samasataha uktam, I have briefly but comprehensively presented 4 topics of the 6 topics that Arjuna wanted to know. Lord Krishna is saying, right? So what are the 4 that Lord Krishna is mentioning? Kshetram, number 1, means the entire object of experience made up of inert matter. Achetana prapanchaha, that is Kshetram, which includes the body and mind also, because they are also made up of matter only, right? So it's not only the material universe, but the body, mind, sense complex also. The second one is Kshetrajnaha, right, which is not mentioned, but we have to add here, being the conscious principle, which is aware of the body, mind, as well as the external world, right? So the experiencing principle, Kshetram, Kshetrajnaha, right, is experiencing the Kshetram. So that's the Chetana Tattva. That's the second topic. The third topic is Jnanam, very important. From 8th verse up to 12th verse, in 5 verses, Lord Krishna gave a list of 20 virtues, which are very, very important for a Vedantic student. Intellectually gathering the knowledge is one thing, but refining of the character is another thing, right? So beginning from amanitvam, adambitvam, etc., right? So those are the virtues that we saw. That is Jnanam, the third topic. The fourth topic is Neyam or Brahman, which is the same as Kshetrajnaha only, with only one subtle difference. When consciousness is enclosed within the body, we name it Kshetrajnaha. The very same consciousness as the all-pervading principle, we call it Brahman, like enclosed space and all-pervading space. They are seemingly different, but really they are not different, because Brahman cannot be divided at all. So Nyayam is the fourth topic, right? And all of them I have taught you, Krishna says, right? Etad Vijnaya. If you clearly know these topics and understand the whole world is matter, and I am the consciousness principle, I am the experiencer of all, but I am not affected or contaminated. If you remember the 5 capsules of Vedanta, it will be very nice to remember in this context. I am of the nature of eternal, right? And all pervading consciousness. Let's take here. I am of the nature of eternal and all pervading consciousness. I am the only source of permanent peace, security, and happiness. By my mere presence, I give life to the material body, and through the body, I experience the material universe. I am not affected by anything that takes place in the material world or the material body mind complex. By forgetting my real higher nature, I convert life into a struggle, and by remembering my nature, I convert life into a sport or entertainment, right? So Vedanta says the entire world is worth appreciating, but not worth emotionally leaning on. So therefore, I am the only source of permanent peace, security, and happiness. It's very useful to remember these 5 capsules and practice them and imbibe them, right? So that when we go through difficult situations in life, we are able to bring this teaching to readily available to us, so that we can handle situations much better. But this doesn't happen overnight. We have to imbibe the teaching over a period of time, right? So whenever there is helplessness or anger or frustration that is coming up because of the problems or samsara, we can claim this higher nature, and it is very useful at that time, right? So therefore, this jnanam brings about a transformation in life. Therefore, it is worth dedicating the entire life for attaining this knowledge. Even if we gain this knowledge at the age of 80, 85, right? whatever is remaining, the years that are remaining, we can be peaceful. Right? Anytime you get this knowledge, it is worthy. Therefore, Lord Krishna says, Etad Vijnaya, by gaining this knowledge, Mad Bhava Yopapadyate, that spiritual seeker becomes fit for oneness with Brahman. Mad Bhavaha means Paramatma Bhavaha, Brahma Bhavaha, Moksha Bhavaha. So he becomes fit to attain moksha, not after death, but even while living. Right? I don't look at life as a liability, but an asset. So Lord Krishna gives a note. It is not that easy to attain this knowledge. It requires a lot of effort and it requires a lot of Ishvara's grace also. Lot of punyam is also required. So Lord Krishna says, Mad Bhaktaha means my devotee alone will get my grace and attain this jnanam. So when Lord Krishna says Mad Bhaktaha, the devotee might have a doubt. What kind of a bhakta is Lord Krishna referring to here, right? So we have to remember 7th chapter and the type of bhaktas mentioned. There were 4 types of bhaktas mentioned there. Artha Bhakta, who worships Lord only when there are problems, right? Artharthi Bhakta, a one who worships Lord whenever he wants success in his ventures, right? Whenever he is starting a new venture, etc. They are Artharthi Bhaktas, right? And then we also have the other Bhakta, which is Jignasu Bhakta, right? So where I use my bhakti for spiritual growth, right? Amanitvam, Adambitvam, etc. We saw, right? All the virtues of which can be used for spiritual growth, right? So that is Jignasu Bhakta. It is the spiritual seeker's bhakti, right? And he expresses that bhakti in the form of Pancha Mahayajnaha. And what is the phalam that he expects, right? Annapurne, Sadapurne, Shankara Pranavallabe, Jnana Vairagya Siddhyartham. Such a bhakta, right, will get a lot of internal mental refinement and the spiritual knowledge will be very easily assimilated. So while others are struggling, this person will effortlessly handle that, and therefore Mad Bhaktaha means Jignasu Bhaktaha. So Etad Vijnaya, through this knowledge he attains moksha. Now Lord Krishna wants to enter into the last 2 topics which Arjuna had asked for, which starts from verse 20. Verse 19 is a consolidating verse, right? So from 20 alone, the next topic actually starts. Prakritim Purusham Chaiva, Prakritim Purusham Chaiva, Vidyanadi Ubhavapi, Vidyanadi Ubhavapi, Vikaramsha Gunanshaiva, Vikaramsha Gunanshaiva, Vidhi Prakriti Sambhavan, Vidhi Prakriti Sambhavan. So from the 20th verse to the 24th verse, 5 verses, Lord Krishna enters into the last pair of topics, namely Purusha and Prakriti. As we saw earlier also, the word Purusha and Prakriti are only synonyms for 2 topics, which we have already seen before. Purusha is another name for Kshetrajnaha or Nyayam, right? Because all of these mean Chaitanyam only. Nyayam, Purushaha, right? Kshetrajnaha, Chaitanyam, all of them refer to Purushaha or Chaitanyam only, right? And the world is Prakriti, right? Which is also used to signify or denote Kshetram, the field of experience of the material universe. So Purushaha means consciousness, Prakriti means matter, Prakriti, right? So Lord Krishna wants to present them in a slightly different manner so that he can use this topic to talk about creation. Basically, he wants to bring in that topic, right? So we always have this question of how did the cosmos originate, right? That question, even modern cosmology, they keep on asking, right? For instance, Stephen Hawking, he struggled towards the end of his life with his, health and his diseases, etc. But still in some interview, right, when he was asked, right, whether, what did he think about mercy killing and assisted death, etc. He was very clear. He said, If people consider me a burden, I don't have a problem. But as far as I am concerned, I would like to live for some more years, seeking what? The question behind cosmology. What is this cosmos all about? How did it emerge, etc. Right? I have so many questions that are unanswered. So the human intellect always wants to know how Bhagavan created this universe. Why did he create this universe? Right? The details we are curious to know, right? So Lord Krishna wants to present that here, which is very similar to cosmology, right? Cosmology means the srishti or the origination of the universe. Now Lord Krishna in the 7th chapter presented two concepts, para prakriti and apara prakriti, right? Purushaha and prakriti we are seeing here. So Purushaha refers to para prakriti, right? And apara prakriti is the prakriti tattvam, right? So para is called Purushaha, apara prakriti is called Prakritihi, right? So Lord Krishna says, look at the words he uses. Prakritim, Purusham, Chaiva. Consciousness as well as matter. Ubhau api anadi. Both are anadi, beginningless. Both of them are not created by anyone. Both of them are anadi, right? Beginningless, uncreated. Matter as well as consciousness, right? So that's the first message of the Vedanta, right? Nothing is created, right? Neither the consciousness nor the matter, right? So in Mandukya Karika also this is reiterated by Gaudapada Acharya, says the creation word itself is a misnomer, right? So for a wrong question, there can never be a right answer, right? So you cannot, for instance, ask how many kilograms is the distance between T Nagar and say Anna Nagar, right? So you have to be careful. The question itself is wrong. So Lord Krishna says there is no such thing called creation. Consciousness was, consciousness is, and ever will be. Matter was, is, and ever will be. Then the only difference is consciousness is the changeless principle and matter is the changing principle, right? It will changingly exist, if we may use that. Basically, it's a continuously changing principle, that is matter, right? So thus the changing eternity and the changeless eternity. So in Sanskrit, one is called Parinami Nityam, the changing one. Another is called Kutastha Nityam, the changeless eternity, right? Kutastha Nityam, right? So Kutastha is, as I said, the anvil on which, they hit with a hammer and it stays strong, right? So that is Kutastha Nityam, right? And or in simple language, Savikara Nityam and Nirvikara Nityam. Savikara, the one which changes, right? So therefore, Prakritim Purusham Chaiva. Prakriti is matter, Purusha is consciousness. Ubhau api anadi, right? The world never came into existence because the world always existed. Not in this form, but in some other form. You can say energy form, potential form, etc. Right? So Vedanta says you experience it regularly, right? This kind of experience where during deep sleep, everything that you experience now, all varieties of living being, body, emotion, intellect, right? All of them resolve in the deep sleep state. You only experience total blankness, right? And that is the entire world is in potential form. That potential form where the experiencer experience division is not available. Space-time division is not available, right? So that is the potential seed condition called Prakriti, right? And consciousness is there as the witness, which is the Purushaha, right? This Purushaha Prakriti mixture alone we call Ardhanarishwaraha Bhagavan. Why Ardhanarishwaraha? Because there is a Purusha and Prakriti Dravyam, right? Dvayam, Prakriti and Purusha Dvayam, and that's why symbolically we refer to as Ardhanarishwaraha, right? So we discussed the common features, the uncommon features, etc. So according to Vedanta, consciousness does not have a beginning. And according to modern science, consciousness is generated in the brain, right? So Vedanta says brain does not generate consciousness. Brain only manifests the consciousness which is already there, right? And both consciousness and matter have been there from Anadi Kale, both are beginningless, right? So we should never say creation, basically. It is manifestation of the world, right? So the second common feature is not only both are Anadi, right? Both are Karanam, right? So this is the common feature, right? So what is the difference between the two? In the 7th chapter we saw. We used an acronym called CAD, C-A-D. Consciousness is without change, right? Consciousness is without attribute. Consciousness is without divisions. But Prakriti has always had all three, right? And will continue to have both at the micro level as well as macro level. It is subject to change. It has attributes and it has divisions also, right? So matter has got change, attribute as well as division. And we talk about Trigunatmika Maya, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, right? The three aspects, the doing faculty, the knowing faculty, the Sattva aspect, the doing faculty, the Rajo aspect, and the resting faculty, which is the Tamo aspect, right? That's why our body-mind complex is either always knowing something or doing something, or it is resting, right? So these are the various attributes, right? So finally, matter is subject to division and consequent multiplication. So Pancha Bhutani, in the form of Pancha Bhautika Prapancham, right, comes, right? It evolves, right? So consciousness does not evolve into anything, but matter evolves into the Pancha Bhutam, right? Pancha Bhutani or Pancha Bhautika Prapancha. So Lord Krishna says, Vikaram cha gunam chaiva. Vikaraha means all these products, Karyam and Gunaha, all these attributes, Sattvika, Rajasika and Tamasika. In fact, the entire 14th chapter, we are going to divide the entire humanity into Sattvic personality, Rajasic personality and Tamasic personality, and which personality is good for which job, right? We are going to see. For spiritual growth, which personality is required more? We are going to be seeing that, right? So the chapter itself, the 14th chapter, is going to be called Gunatraya Vibhaga Yogaha, right? All these products and their guna, Prakriti Sambhavan Viddhi, they are born out of Prakriti. Again, born means evolve or manifest out of Prakriti, right? So we will stop here and we'll take up 21st verse in the next class. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay. Any questions? Yeah, was the audio breaking? I don't know, everybody said clear afterwards. Okay. Any questions? I know today's class was a little heavy because we were entering into abstract areas. So anybody has any questions? You can raise your hand also, because if you can't, type out. Okay, I know you need to, spend some time reflecting on today's class, right? So will you provide the translation for the sukta? There is actually a link. Maybe I'll just put it up in the slides. It has the entire translation, a very nice rendering also, and you can take a look at it. I will include that also here. Anybody else? Mohana, you're self-muted. You can go ahead.
Namaskara, Mahodaya. Can you please spend another 1 minute on the 18th verse?
On the 18th verse, once again. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Tell me.
This is the one.
Do you want something more specific on this?
No,
Basic.
I just want to understand it, kind of.
Basically, it's the consciousness is the light behind everything. Why do we call it light? Very simple. Basically, even if there is light in this room, the simplest example, if there is a chair in this room, if I have to discern that chair, I have to understand by what? By seeing with my eyes. So the sense organs are a light in a way for seeing the chair. Now that alone is not enough. The mind has to be behind the sense organ for me to discern that chair as chair. Because if the mind is not behind the eye, I will only have a blank look. Now, extending this further, consciousness is the light, which is the ultimate light, because it has to be behind the mind in order to discern, in order to make the eye see this chair. So the ultimate light, right, of consciousness is the light that makes us actually see the object and register it in our mind. Therefore, the greatest light is the light of consciousness. And that is what is said in both this verse as well as the Mundaka Upanishad mantra, na tatra you saw that the next.
Shamyata, Mahodaya, I have one small thing. You are saying, are you, it's when you say mind, do you mean the mind or do you mean the brain? Because the brain works to give the light, right? From the eye, being eye doctor, I'm saying, the eye, and then you have the optic nerve, then it is attached to the brain, and then the brain does the image and all that. So when you say mind, you mean the mind or the brain?
So this, I think you should also go back to Introduction to Vedanta. In Vedanta, we do not treat the brain, right, as something that produces consciousness or is conscious. We use the word mind. So if you see the 4 aspects of Antakarana in Introduction to Vedanta, the Sukshma Shariram comprises of 19 components. The Pancha Karmendriyani, Pancha Jnanendriyani, Pancha Prana, and 4 parts or components of Antakaranam. The Antakaranam, we say there is a intellectual or decisive faculty, the rational faculty. Then we say there is this mind, which is the emotional faculty. Then we say there is Chittam, and Chittam is the memory, and Ahankara, the ego faculty. So we never treat brain as a distinct component or an organ in the Vedantic parlance. We use one of these faculties. Therefore, we say consciousness blesses the Sukshma Shariram, and in turn, basically, it blesses the mind, we say, as the Sakshyam, and then that in turn blesses the rest of the sense organs. So we don't use the term brain in Vedanta.
Dhanyavada.
Okay. There, I think nobody else has any other questions. So it will take a while to assimilate this. I think you should just go through the class once again, or also, as I said, Introduction to Vedanta clears a lot of these, so you might want to go through them as well. The classes there. Okay. So we will stop here, and we will meet next week, same time. And I just put this here, 25th October, because that's the 4th week from now. I'm going to confirm whether Vyoma has a tradition of not having the class. So if that's the case, then I will abide by that. I will come back to you next week. Okay. Hari Om. Dhanyavadaha.